Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Independent Producers Organization live showcase. Tonight, we're going to spend probably a little more time talking about immigration. But first, I want to announce my co-host is Bruce Broussard. He's running for mayor, and if we have a chance, we'll talk about that. Otherwise, we have a call-in coming from Minnesota.
Wow.
World population balance. Have we had anybody call in yet? Oh, okay. No, just put him on when he does. Just tell him to go ahead and say hello. In the meantime.
He's on.
Oh, okay. Tell him to turn it on.
Turn him on.
Oh, this is David Paxton.
Okay, that's what we wanted to hear.
Hi, David.
How are you? This time there's two of us.
Hello.
And I wanted to try to identify you a little more.
Hello. There's lots of distortion. It's not easy to hear you right now.
Okay. Well, I hope they can clear it up.
Okay.
As I keep talking, you keep telling me if there's a problem.
Well, the word talking got really clear, and then all of a sudden it's back to distortion again.
Yeah, I hear what some of that is. I hear what
it's distortion right now. It's all
distortion.
Distorted.
Hey, Jim, you got it? They're working on it. They're working on it. Okay.
They're working on it.
Okay.
In the meantime, you are calling from Minnesota. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Minneapolis, and the World Population Balance. You're president of that. Can you tell what websites people might get on to?
Well, our website, yes, is simply worldpopulationbalance.org.
Okay.
And we have a lot of exciting things up there, things about the full truth about overpopulation and the implications of it, and also about what we need to do, how it is solvable, what we need to do to solve overpopulation humanely, and we can do that in the next we can head in that direction in the next few years and decades to actually solve overpopulation humanely, and that's the direction that we hope all people will start to head.
Okay, just so you know, I can hear you perfectly. Just want you to know, the Deputy Director's Corner, is that something else that people can get a hold of, or?
You're very distorted, so it's very hard to understand you.
It's okay, Jim.
Deputy Director's Corner. Can you hear that?
Not very well.
All right.
It's just a really fuzzy connection. Should I call back?
Yeah, maybe. Hey, Jim, would you give us a thumbs up as to whether or not whether or not the caller is clear?
I think the caller is good.
No, he's still having trouble.
Okay.
He's gonna try to get them. He's working on it now. Okay, hang up. Okay, hang up and then call back, I guess.
Okay, all right. One of the things in the Deputy Director's Corner talks about is how they have been doing a catch and release of people coming across the border, and that means all the people they are arrested and they are given a thing where they're supposed to come back to court, and they just ignore this, and it just makes the people down there in the border control just they're embarrassed about this kind of thing, and willful disregard for coming across even into the United States. It's almost like they're protected when they come in. And the number of people that keep coming in, it almost seems like some of them are making a point of trying to increase in numbers without let up. And this is almost hard to believe that your question is, are economists finally recognizing that mass immigration is unsustainable? We just can't keep taking so many people in this country. It just can't be done. It's the same as was true with Canada. Canada is full. Well, the same is true with this country because we keep using so many of the resources. The resources and the use of it is what uses up this country. We use what, 25% of the world's resources, and that includes oil, all that. There just isn't any let up. Another thing here is about smog in China. It closed schools and construction sites. They have to cut the traffic way down. You know, we get that here. We get the smog from China here. And people question whether or not there's too many people around. That's what causes all this.
Still a phone? He's on there? Okay.
Hello?
You hear?
David?
Hello, yes.
Okay, I've been doing some of the talking about it, but I want you to go ahead because your voice is really coming across quite clear.
Good, and you're able. I'm well able to understand you right now.
Okay,
That's
good.
terrific.
Good. There we go. Great.
Okay, go ahead with.
Well, I was just saying that right now that the resource experts on the planet, many of them they've done a lot of research over the last few years to determine how many people can the renewable resources of the planet provide for sustainably. In other words, right now, we know we're not sustainable. We know that we're consuming many resources faster, far faster than they can support. Like, for example, did you know that farmland in the world last year there was about 75 million acres of farmland worldwide that was lost to food production, and it was due to two main reasons. One was just plain erosion, and the other was more people creating more streets, more roads, more shacks, more shanty towns, paving over. In other words, paving over perfectly good farmland that was growing food a year ago. They had to pave it over to start using it for living conditions and so on. And the year before that, there was 75 million acres of farmland worldwide that was taken out of production.
Wow.
The year before that, there was 75. So each year, for the last several years, we've been taking roughly 75 million acres. That's equivalent to the whole states of Iowa and Wisconsin combined, right here in the Midwest, next to me in Minnesota. And of course, every year we've been adding human population increase of about 75 million people. So you've got more and more people each year at the very same time that you've got less and less farmland to grow food. And that obviously isn't sustainable long term. Similar with ocean fish stocks. Ocean fish stocks in many parts of the oceans of the world, they've been declining, going down, down, down every year. We know several years ago, in fact, that the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, that marvelous production of cod fish that they'd been hauling out of there for centuries, taking a lot of it over to Europe. Several hundred years ago, we found out more recently that they were fishing it. That whole thing collapsed. The Canadian government stepped in and shut down the industry for a while to try to see if the cod would return. And of course, they didn't do it to try to hurt the fishing families that depended on those cod. They did it to try to prevent the total collapse of that cod industry. But it was still a disaster. It was kind of like the old story of too little, too late. Too little, too late. That's happening on so many issues with regard to resource depletion right now on the planet. And of course, what happened is that some other undesirable kinds of fish, less desirable, undesirable eels and other things moved in where they had been before. They had been creating a lot of cod. Now they've got less desirable fish that are in that niche. The ecologists say that it will take many, many years to restore that cod, that really abundant cod industry that was up there. So here we are on the planet with over 7 billion. The UN and other sources say that by 2100, only 80-some years from now, we'll have, if we don't change course, if we don't change our ways and change direction with regard to human numbers, we'll likely have, the UN says, some 11 billion people on the planet.
That's right. We can't handle that.
No, we're not. And not only can we not handle that, but of course we know we're utterly right now not handling 7+ billion sustainably. Are we handling them unsustainably? Sure, they're alive right now on the planet, but at all these costs, all these expenses of more pollution. We've got in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that huge trash bin area now that they say is what, the size of Texas and
That's
growing.
right.
Wow.
Yeah, and the coral reefs. I've had people come up to me, divers, over the years when I give public presentations. I have divers come up to me frequently, amateur divers, and they're almost crying. Some of them. They say, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I went down into the Caribbean and I found some beautiful coral reefs that I just loved. I fell in love with these coral reefs. They were so gorgeous. And recently I was back. I had a couple of cases they're telling me where they went back 20, 30 years later, and they're all dead. It's just gray. There are no bright reds and yellows and blues and greens of fish and coral and all these different things. They're all dead now. Wow. And so that's not happening by just accident. That's happening because too many human beings are attempting to struggle to stay alive, to keep resources coming in order to stay alive.
I'm glad you're coming up with this stuff. I hadn't heard a lot of these things before. I know you are talking about the Pacific Ocean garbage patch. And then, of course, there's one down at the Mississippi, wherever it opens out into the ocean. That's
right.
where more garbage is thrown.
Yep. They're happening. It's happening in so many places. And, of course, our water is becoming more and more problematic too. The quality of our water all over the planet, and that's another impact, another result of far more people trying to struggle to live in a given area than the resources can support. Over half the people in the world today. Did you know? The UN is saying that over half the people on the planet today are in countries where water tables are actually, freshwater tables are falling, are going down. Right here in the good old U.S. of A., and there's that huge aquifer called the Ogallala, that stretches from South Dakota clear down to Texas, and right now the water has been depleted out of that aquifer, equal to, I think it's at least half or more of all the water that's in Lake Erie. It's been drained down that far, and the experts say that the water in the Ogallala may be drained down so far that it will no longer give enough water in another short, maybe 25 years or so.
Ooh, gee.
We shouldn't have to go there for water. We should get it from rain, and there should be plenty of it, and fewer people.
And of course, it's perfectly okay. In a sustainable kind of way, it's an okay thing to pull water out of an aquifer as long as we pull it out below what's called the recharge rate, the rate of recharge. In other words, if somebody, let's say that some settlers 100 years ago moved into a valley and there was this aquifer underneath that valley, aquifer of nice, fresh, clear, pure, clean water, and somebody dug a well and started taking water out of that well. As long as they're taking water out of that aquifer slower than the rate of replacement, the recharge rate that it's called, and if they got neighbors that move in there a few years later, a few more neighbors come to that valley and they put down a well and they take out water. As long as all those guys are taking water out slower than the recharge rate, they could keep taking water out of that for thousands and thousands of years into the future, of course. But the moment they start taking water out of that aquifer faster than the recharge rate, eventually the aquifer will be depleted, and there will not be water left to take care of people. And what makes it even more challenging, of course, in a situation like that, is that it's basically impossible to know what the recharge rate is, until it's after the fact. Similar, frankly, it reminds me of talking earlier about the Cape Cod. Cape Cod and the Gulf of Newfoundland, the banks of Newfoundland, the Grand Banks, where they had this huge cod industry for years. It was also a real problem in those places. It always is for the fishermen and the biologists that study the fish experts and all that, to know how many fish can they sustainably take out of there before they start overfishing. You know,
That's
and
right.
and what generally happens is they don't know what the sustainable rate is until they've overshot it, until they're taking too many out, and then they start to deplete the fish, and then the whole system collapses. You know, the fish population will collapse, and that, you know, that I'm reminded of orange roughy too. You guys remember a few years ago there used to be a fish that was served in restaurants a lot called orange roughy, and that
No.
fish came from, I'm told that fish came from around New Zealand and maybe Australia, down in that part of the world. And because when I was a kid, I never heard of orange roughy as a fish. And then, I don't know, 20 years ago or so, we started hearing about it and eating orange roughy. Well, from what I understand, they overfished orange roughy, and that's why we don't hear much about it anymore. And it turns out that they didn't realize, the people fishing orange roughy didn't realize for a number of years that it takes an orange roughy fish several years before it matures enough to reproduce.
Wow.
And before they figured all that out, they had overfished the orange roughy because they were fishing out these younger orange roughy fish faster than they could reproduce. And then, of course, they fished them out faster so that they were being fished and killed before they ever reproduced, a lot more and more of them. And so that whole population of orange roughy took a huge nosedive too. And we're doing that. You know, human beings are doing similar kinds of things on resource after resource after resource
That's right.
now on the whole planet, and obviously that's not sustainable. So therefore, we need to get human numbers back down on the planet into the neighborhood of maybe 1 to 2 to possibly 3 billion, although it's questionable that even 3 billion is sustainable. And eventually, it's going to happen. Eventually, human numbers on the planet are going to decline. The real important question is, will it happen humanely as a result of dramatic reductions in birth rates, which would be the only humane way I know for it to happen, or the inhumane way, where it happens because of a result of more famines and wars and diseases and misery and suffering and early death.
Actually, David,
That's something we all want to avoid.
actually, David, if we're going to be running out of oil soon, and people don't realize that's it. There just isn't anymore, and we are so used to using and having oil and gas, people just can't even imagine what's going to happen. Even when I drive down the street, rows of cars everywhere, and they all have to have gas. And one of these days, no more gas, and people don't realize something has to be done now. And another thing that people don't even think about, you have to start saving the gas and the oil in the ground for the airplanes. The people are going to want to keep flying in airplanes, so they need to start getting into electric cars and such as that as soon as possible. And I just don't think they realize how important that is, to start making changes now in our lives, really. So,
Well, certainly, yeah, that'll all help a little bit, but when it comes to humanely solving overpopulation, none of those things will help solve overpopulation. None of those things that you're mentioning. In other words, we've got a hybrid car right now. My wife and I drive a Prius, and we compost, and we've got LED bulbs, and we recycle, and we do all these kinds of things to reduce. And those are all great things to do
right.
if you want to reduce your ecological footprint, your carbon footprint. And of course, that's a good thing for all of us to do. But reducing a person's ecological or carbon footprint doesn't do a single thing to help reduce overpopulation or solve overpopulation.
That's right.
There's only one thing, and one thing only, that will help reduce overpopulation, and that is reducing the total number of people on the planet.
That's right.
And of course, as I said earlier, we can either do that humanely, or it will be it will be thrust upon us inhumanely with more famines, wars, diseases, and early deaths, and so on. So humanity is at a major crossroads right now in terms of where we head down the road in order to leave our future generations, our children. My newest relative is about 6 months old now, a great nephew, and I, frankly, I am very alarmed about what kind of a life he's going to have on this planet
right.
in
That's right.
30 and 40 and 50 years, and even 10 and 15 and 20 years from now.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. Well, where's the United Nations on all this issue? You know.
That's a good question. He wants to know where the United Nations is.
Sure. Well, it's interesting because the United Nations is certainly, there are people at the United Nations who've been alarmed about this going way back to the 1940s. The first director of the United Nations, what was the predecessor of something called the United Nations Fund for Population Activities, the UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund. The first director of that was a very well-known biologist whose grandfather was Sir Thomas Huxley back in Great Britain, and this person was named Sir Julian Huxley, and he was terribly alarmed about population way back in the 40s and where it was heading, and knew that we needed to change course. And so the UN has had people for all these decades concerned. But as far as where they are today, back to your question more directly, they're mired down in politics with regard to the population issue. They are very much intertwined with politics. We cannot, I have not given much expectation for years for the UN to be showing real courageous leadership, fully truthful leadership on talking about this issue, let alone acting on this issue. The last time the UN had a major worldwide conference on the overpopulation issue, I was a participant in that conference in Cairo, Egypt. And since then, there's been no more conferences of that scale because the issue has been so bogged down with politics and arguments and so on. So we must take action at the grassroots level. If people listening to this program are really aware and concerned about the issue, I encourage you to contact me at worldpopulationbalance.org. You can send us an email and send it to my attention, Dave Paxson, Paxson, and I would like to begin working with you to form a growing partnership, a group of people who are going to become active to help actually move the conversation on this issue. We must, at the grassroots, it's going to take a groundswell at the grassroots, I'm convinced, because political leaders are very bogged down. I mean, I've had conversations with members of Congress for years about this, and by and large, they all feel kind of like, well, ho-hum. I got to be careful about it. If I want to get reelected, I got to be careful about what I say about certain issues, and that's one.
David, I think one of the problems is when you try to go to schools, when you try to go in front of an audience or on television or whatever, what you're talking and asking them to be involved in interferes with their income stream in some way. They're going to look at it as, well, I don't know, then that less people, less money for me. That kind of, it's not going to happen right away, but somehow I think the income stream is what affects their thinking. And many of these places, we try to have some of these major studios listen to us when we talk. And I still think they and our schools don't want to interfere. Don't want to be interfered with the income stream and the money they have coming in, and they think this will do it because it's so severe and such a strong and important thing to be dealing with.
Oh, sure. Those are more of the challenges. There's a whole array of challenges to mainly working on this issue. But I've got one prop that I always like to play here, and I'm going to turn it on right now. I think your listeners can probably hear that
Okay.
ticking sound, right?
Yes.
Every time this ticks, this is a metronome, and every time it ticks right now, it symbolizes the addition on the planet of one more live person net gain. In other words, that's not the rate of birth that you're hearing. A lot of third graders, when I play this for them, third graders think that, mistakenly, they think that that's the birth rate on the planet. But no, the birth rate is far faster than this ticking sound. This ticking sound here is the rate of net gain, birth minus death.
That's right.
So, since we started this program about half an hour ago, there are about 4,500 more people alive in the world than there were just half an hour ago. And that's netted out, that's the excess birth minus the death. And we need to turn that number upside down. We need to make it so that there are more deaths. We need to get the birth so low.
Right.
We need to get the birth rate below the death rate so that there are fewer births every hour than there are deaths.
That's
so that
right.
the total numbers of people on the planet will slowly begin to decline from 7+ billion back down to 7 to 6 to 5. And if we got the average, if we followed the lead of countries like Thailand today, the country of Thailand has done wonders in the last 40-some years on this issue, because 45 years ago or so, they were averaging 7 children, average, per couple in Thailand, which means that many couples were having 8 and 9 children or more.
Wow.
But today, thanks to some phenomenal leadership in Thailand on this issue, they have dramatically reduced their birth rates well below an average of 2 per couple, from 7, an average of 7 down to less than 2, and they got it down close to 1.5 for a while. If the whole world, if all over the world right now, we got the average birth rate per couple down to, per family, down to about 1.5, do you know that by 2100, instead of having 11 billion people on the planet like the UN is predicting right now, there would be only about 5 billion people, 2 billion below what we have now, over 2 billion below what we have now. What a victory, what a huge victory that would be for all of humanity on the whole planet, because it means that we would have less than half of the numbers of the 11 billion, 5 billion, and that means that we would have less than half of the consumption level and pollution level and depletion of resource level, loss of farmland and loss of ocean fish stocks and loss of fresh water, loss of oil and gas if there's any left by then, and on and on. So that is the only way that I know humanely to solve this issue is to slash our birth rates.
That's right.
Can I ask a question?
So that takes the things that you need birth control on, and you have to put them in effect. Married couples, couples need to think about it. Say, maybe we better have just one or none or something like that. They need to think about that.
Yes. Well, thank you. Richard, thanks for mentioning that, because on our website, I invite all of your listeners right now, viewers, to go there and we have a Sustainable Population Pledge initiative on our website, and we have, I think it's 20-some countries now. People from around the world in over 20 countries have signed up pledging on our website for the Sustainable Population Pledge. And it has several different check boxes. And so every person that's listening to this program is eligible to sign up. In other words, one of the check boxes says, I hereby pledge that I'm not going to have any more children than I have already. That's for some people, because some people already have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 people or children or more. But they can sign up the pledge to have no more, and we appreciate that, because that's important too for everybody to understand the importance of this. Another checkbox says, I pledge to have no more than 1 child. And then another checkbox says, I pledge to have no children.
Oh,
and we're getting a lot of people up there who are checking the box to have no more children at all. We're getting a lot that check the box that they're only going to have 1 or none, those boxes. And it's very exciting to have from around the world. And it's also touching to read some of the comments of some of the people who are checking those boxes. It's really, really quite neat.
Is the one that people that are doing that, are they the top level politicians that can effectively do something about it and make it known that they're talking what they're talking about?
You mean the people signing up on it?
Are they reflecting the heads of the government of those countries?
Oh, in some cases they are, sure.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just glancing down here. Here's somebody from let's see, some of the most recent people have signed it here. Somebody from Australia. This person said, "I think this is a fantastic idea to solve overpopulation and many of our planet's environmental issues. I support this 100%. Here's somebody from Finland that signed up. Before you insist on your rights to another child to satisfy your own needs, think. Think of the needs of the people who remain after you're gone." And here's somebody from the U.S. I love the billfold size wallet cards as I distribute them with responses that are very positive. By the way, that's something else. If you're interested, we've got some fabulous billfold size solve overpopulation cards, we call them, that are available, and you can email. Excuse me. You can email our office, and they will send you some of these small size cards, and they say on them. The headline is "Solving Overpopulation by Dramatically Reducing Birth. Population in 2100 would be about 5 billion, less than half the projected 11 billion. That's a great victory for all humanity." And it goes on and on this card. It's a twofold card, and inside it there's another neat tiny little chart that says this at the top. It says a two-child average will not solve overpopulation. And
That's
the
right.
reason, and then it shows why.
It expands it.
If we had a two-child average on the planet right now, the total population of the world would go up from 7+ billion, where it is, on up to over 9 billion people. And then it would stay above 8 billion for about 200 more years. That's why it's critically important that we've really got to get the birth rate average below a two-child average, down closer to a 1.5-child average.
Can I ask a question? Let me ask a question real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, David.
Yes.
What about the two of the largest countries like China and India? They got 1 billion or so populations over there. How are they responding, if you will, to this concern, to these concerns?
Well, that's a great question. And China, of course, for a number of years had a one-child. Well, we refer to it not as a one-child policy, but a so-called one-child policy. The reason we say a so-called is because they never really had a one-child average. They had exceptions for ethnic minorities in the country so that they could have more than one, and they also did not enforce the policy in rural China as much as they did in the cities. So the average birth rate in China, fertility rate, got down to maybe about 1.5 or so, which means that China has today, as a result of that policy, the country of China today probably has about 300 to 350 million fewer people in China right now today than they would have had if they had not put that policy in effect. So that's a tremendous benefit to all the people today in China, because if they had another 350 million people in that country, also gobbling up resources and polluting and all that, they would be even more overwhelmed and worse off. And they would not be having the economic upturn that the Chinese people have been experiencing. It just wouldn't be possible if they'd had to raise another 350 million people. So that's China. India, on the other hand, has not stepped up to the plate in any real substantial way on dealing with this issue.
They're just not able to do anything in India.
They're still growing fast.
Wow.
Yeah. They just don't have the ability to deal with it.
And what about resources?
Yeah, they don't have they don't see it as something that they need to address. Is a lot of the case, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, they could address it if here's somebody on our website from India that signed up on our pledge, and this person says it is high time human beings understood that it should be population, emphasis on the shun. Clearly, we are sitting on a time bomb, and I am on a mission to create awareness among Indians now. That's really inspiring, isn't it?
Wow.
See, I had to make another comment about the China. They have 120-mile-long traffic jams because they keep trying to get another 27,000 cars into the country every year or so. Their problems are endless when it comes to cars, and they don't know how to deal with them. They don't realize they're related to the population, and they
Yeah.
want to keep having kids. They just seem to think, well, we just have to keep having children. And no, you got to stop sometime. Sometimes you got to stop. Of course, that's us saying that here, and we can only say that so much.
David, what about tools to communicate to folks around the world, like Facebook? The Facebooks and Twitters. Are you using some of these tools?
Yeah, oh yes, we're very active on Facebook. You can go to our Facebook page as well, World Population Balance on Facebook. And we invite you all to come there. And again, I sure hope that you all come up and join us on our Sustainable Population Pledge too, because we're really thrilled to have the support that we're having on that. Gosh, there's another person from India here that signed up and says, the world needs to be saved from destruction through reducing of human numbers. There's a comment here from somebody in the United States. My husband and I are childless by choice due to understanding from a young age that overpopulation is the most critical problem facing humans, as well as all other living entities on Earth.
Oh, good.
It sounds like something I could have written, but a woman named Cindy Burke wrote it. She says, "We thank you for the work you're doing and hope to see a groundswell of support that reopens on a world stage this most necessary conversation."
That's right. That would be great if something like that could just happen. I think they've got some pictures there showing lots of people. Wow. Yeah, that's right. Just too many people.
As far as food supply is concerned, I was thinking about those two countries that we just mentioned, about China and India.
Yes.
What are their numbers looking like in terms of feeding that population? Are they farming more and things of that nature?
Well, as I said earlier, farmland is declining all the time. We're losing farmland a lot, and at the same time that farmland that we're losing 75 million acres a year, equivalent to the whole states of Wisconsin and Iowa combined together each year. There is some land, by the way, that is being put into production each year. More land that's being put into farm production. But there's two vitally important things, sobering things to understand, to keep in mind about the land that's being put into farm production versus the 75 million acres that's being lost. First of all, the amount of acreage that's being added to production each year is nowhere near as much as 75 million that's being lost. And what do you suppose is the other big problem about the land that's being put into farm production? You want to guess?
Housing?
Uses up water, among other things.
Well, yeah, but even more fundamental is this: the land that's being put into farm production has not been there's not been growing food in the past, is nowhere near as fertile as the land that's being lost.
Wow.
In other words, we humans have been for centuries. We've been farming the easiest, the most fertile, the most productive farmland that we come across. Right.
Right.
First, we farm that. We start farming that first, and then only later do we start farming land that's less fertile and not as productive, and only after that do we start farming land that's even less fertile and less productive and marginal, so-called. Same thing. Same principle applies to things like coal and oil. The first oil that we pumped 100 years ago out of the ground, 150 years ago, was the light sweet crude. It had more bang for the buck and all that. Same thing with coal. Anthracite coal is the hottest burning coal around. The most energy per ton of coal was in anthracite coal, and then there was bituminous, which is a lower grade of coal, and then subbituminous, and then you get down to lignite. And of course, unfortunately, there are some, when it comes to coal, there are some uses for coal that only anthracite could do. I mean, like smelting steel and things like that. You need the hottest burning kind of coal for those kinds of things, and you can't use the subbituminous and the lignite. But today on the planet, when we talk about lots of coal still being around, we're not talking about anthracite, because nearly all the anthracite coal on the planet that's known has already been mined and burned. The vast majority of it. We're just on the tail end of mining and burning anthracite coal.
Wow.
And we've burned through an awful lot of the bituminous. And now we're working harder on the subbituminous and the lignite, and they don't have that much energy value, nowhere near the energy value that the anthracite has. So in other words, all types of coal. I guess a summary way to think of it is, there's different grades of coal. Not all coal is equal. Not all oil is equal.
That's right.
And so on. And not all farmland is equal. And so we can't just be naively thinking that if 1 acre of farmland is taken out of production and another acre of farmland is added, that we're at that we're at square one or something, the ground zero. We're not. We're losing ground.
Wow.
That's right.
But I thought in this country we recycle. I mean, we actually manage, if you will, farmland
We try to manage it.
in this country. I thought.
We continue to get good food and everything. You'd think everything was working pretty well.
But
with
we're
that.
throwing away a lot of food too.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yeah, we're throwing away a lot of food, and of course because of a good friend of mine who was one of my main mentors, primary mentors for many years. He was a professor of physics at the University of Colorado, and his name was Dr. Albert Bartlett.
Oh yes.
And Al Bartlett used to say that modern agriculture. He'd sort of say this sort of half tongue in cheek, but very seriously too. Modern agriculture is the process of turning petroleum into food.
Wow.
Because when you stop and think, I mean, just really stop and ponder this for a little bit. 150 or so years ago, there was basically hardly a drop of petroleum that was used to produce food anywhere on the planet. 150, 200 years ago, there wasn't any to speak of.
That's right.
And so farmers produced food with the sweat and the muscles of their own backs, and their horses, and their oxen, and so on. That's how they produced food on the planet. Almost all of it. It was muscle power.
Right.
And then we discovered what some people call ancient sunlight. Ancient sunlight is a term used to describe oil, fossil fuels, oil, coal, and so on. And in fact, there's a great book that was written a few years ago called The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, and it's basically pointing out what you were saying earlier, Richard, about how we're burning through like there's no tomorrow.
That's right.
Burning through so much of our coal and oil and coal and natural gas and so on that took millions of years, that was created over millions of years, starting years ago, and now we're just burning through it in 100, 150 years, and when it's gone, it's gone.
Right. One lifetime.
And go ahead.
Al Bartlett was the greatest. He said the United States was the most consuming of all nations.
Sure.
For the resources. We're the ones that took all the others. And India isn't doing that. Doesn't take that much. They just keep having more people. I feel bad for them.
Nearly every country on the planet has an overpopulation problem.
Right.
In one way or another. Mm-hmm. In other words, in the United States, we have, let me forget, let's say Canada, all right? Canada doesn't have anywhere near the number of people for the size of its country as some other countries do, but Canada has more people than its resources can probably sustainably support long term. I mean, in other words, I don't mean 5, 10 years, but I'm talking hundreds of years into the future. Canada can probably not support the 30 to 40, whatever million people that Canada has now. Long term, the resources are not there. They're using up resources faster, many of them, especially non-renewables. They're using them up faster than they can regenerate, of course.
Gee.
And so that's the problem with a country like Canada with regard to human numbers and consumption and resource depletion. Countries like India don't have that big of a resource base relative to the number of people they've got because they're just overwhelmed, as you pointed out, by people. And a lot of other countries in the world are similar like that, China. So they have far more people. They're much more densely populated. So they have a huge, and a lot of the countries in Africa have far more people than the resources can sustainably support too. But then you come to a country like the United States, and it turns out that the U.S. has both problems. It has more people than the resources can sustainably support, and so it's overpopulated, and its resources are being, and we overconsume. You know, our resources are being gobbled up because we're such ravenous consumers, high consumers. So the problem is global. It's
right.
pretty much in every country on the planet.
You know, I just had to make a personal observation. While I'm thinking about all this, I was going along today, and it just seemed like everywhere I looked, there was a lady pushing a baby buggy. And I said,
Sure.
says, nobody's getting the word. Nobody's really doing anything about this. And it's what's really...
Well, there's a few of us, but certainly it's not in the mainstream media. We must have a transformation of understanding on this planet. It is crucial that happens. A sea change. You know, it reminds me of smoking. You know, like smoking 20, 30, 40 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, everybody smoked everywhere, and it was socially accepted, and so on. And then, before we understood how bad smoking was, you remember what we did on airplanes for a while before it was banned on airplanes? For a while there, they used to say, well, if you're a smoker, you have to ride in the back of the plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? But, of course, that's because they didn't understand how bad secondhand smoke was. And once they finally got that understood, then they said, you can't smoke in airplanes anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are at the earlier stages, just like smoking of 50 years ago, with regard to understanding the critical, overwhelming crisis of overpopulation. We're not yet there as a society, and we must move there very fast. That's where we've got to go.
Wow.
That's right. It's hard to know how to convince so many people of what we're talking about here. Like I said, I still am convinced when you go somewhere to try to make a presentation, they're going to say no because, well, they don't want anything to interfere with the way things are going. Things are going so wonderfully for them, and we need to call attention to it.
Sure.
It's just too important.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of somebody being up in a skyscraper somewhere in downtown Portland or somewhere, you know, and if they're up in the top floor, let's say there's an observation deck, and they go out there and they look in the distance, and it's a beautiful spring day, and you know, there's green leaves coming on the trees, and there's a sunlight, and they can see water in the distance, and a nice light breeze, and everything from up there, everything may look really, really great. The world may look really great, but all of a sudden, what would happen if they happen to glance down right down the side of their building to the base, right down to the street right below, and what would they think if they saw, and what would they feel if they saw some guys down there with wrecking balls and sledgehammers and other heavy equipment, where they're starting to bash in the base of the skyscraper that they're on, that they're standing up on the 30th, 40th floor. Well, I'm sure they'd be terrified. And in a very real way, folks, that is what we humans are doing right now to our planet at all levels, all across the globe. Now, we are we are undermining, we are destroying our resource base, and it's wholly unsustainable.
That's right. That's right. We don't have a lot of choices. If we don't do it this solvable way, it'll just come very and hurt. I'm trying to think of the way to describe how bad it can really be if they don't start realizing less people will solve everything. I really feel that's true. Less people will just solve the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure that less people will solve, in and of itself, will solve everything. But it certainly, I'd say the flip side is valid, and that is, unless we dramatically reduce human numbers on the planet, no other issue, no other major problem issue on the planet will be solvable at all. I mean, global climate change won't be solvable. Peace will not be solvable. Ending war will not be solvable. Poverty will not be solvable. Ending homelessness will not be solvable. No other issue on the planet will be solvable unless we dramatically reduce human numbers and as quickly as possible. It's like we're on a ship right now that's got huge gash in the hull of the ship, and the ship is half sunk right now, and we've got to scramble, and we can still save the ship. We can still keep it afloat, and eventually get it back to floating fully. We can still get the water if we take action now. We've got to close a bunch of bulkheads, and we've got to stop more water from coming into that ship, and then slowly start to resurrect, to repair the ship. We can still do that, but we've got to quit talking about what color paint to put on the deck chairs, and talk about we've got to start talking about how to save the ship from sinking.
Well, what about the president's administration? I mean, as far as the president's administration is concerned, and do they see this as a crisis, and at the same time, do they communicate to the United Nations, because that was the whole idea, right? To introduce it to those folks at the table. We got all the countries that are represented, and then boom, then they react to it and put a plan in place and get it done.
I don't think we hear anything
as I was
from
saying earlier, the United Nations is not. It is not. I don't want to put this. I want to try to not to put this too indelicately, but the United Nations is not functioning really fully, truthfully about the overpopulation crisis. They're too bogged down with politics. I have a man who's become a very good friend of mine in Pakistan who is terribly alarmed about overpopulation. I mean, he is just on a mission about trying to address it in Pakistan. He's a government official. He's a high up government official in Pakistan. He's been speaking on this issue some around the world and so on. And he told me several years ago too when we talked about it. I was talking with him about the United Nations, and he said no. He said they're not ever going to act on this thing the way it needs to happen. They're too bogged down with politics about it.
Not paying for it, David.
Yeah. What's that?
They're not paying for it.
Well, that could be part of it. My friend in Pakistan is saying, just like we're saying, he's saying that we need to have one child average of family size for the next several years on the planet. We need to try to get down to as close as we can to a one-child average. A two-child average, like I said earlier, a two-child average will not stop overpopulation. It will not reduce overpopulation for at least 200 or 300 years, and we don't have that kind of time. That's why we've got to slash the birth rate far below an average of 2. And that means that if we have more people, right now there are some people like myself and my wife, we chose not to have any children. So that's the most important thing that we've done with regard to solving overpopulation. In other words, driving a Prius doesn't help solve overpopulation. It does nothing to help solve overpopulation. The only thing that will help solve overpopulation is to have either 0 or one child. That's we have a bumper sticker. In fact, you can go to our website And if you'd like to get a bumper sticker that says "One-Child Families Can Save Humanity," you're welcome to go to our website and contact us for one of
Okay.
those bumper stickers.
David, I just want to say I want to thank you very much. You've been coming across perfectly clear all the time. We got about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and I want you to go over the things that whereby people can see and get a hold of your website and anything else that would be helpful.
Oh, sure, I
Before we
appreciate
close
it.
out here.
WorldPopulationBalance.org is our website. We have. I was just talking with a gentleman today who called our office and wanted me to call him back because he's writing a book about the overpopulation issue, and I was really touched tonight on the phone with him because he was just raving about how good he thinks our website is, especially compared with some of the other population groups in the country. Because we're striving as best we know how to be fully truthful, both about what a critical issue overpopulation is, and the fact that it's solvable, and the fact that there's medicine that we can take to solve overpopulation. I mean, it may not taste great, some of it, but the medicine we can take to solve it is called dramatically reducing birth rates on the planet. So overpopulation.org, WorldPopulationBalance.org is our website, WorldPopulationBalance.org. And if you send an email to the website, if you want to contact me, you can just send an email right to the website, and it'll come through to me, too.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
I
welcome.
want to thank everyone else for fighting to get this phone call through. That was quite a job in itself. So.
And also on our website, we also have what I think is the greatest short film on our homepage called One Planet, One Child that talks about the overpopulation issue. It kind of summarizes, in only 6 minutes long, it summarizes what I've talked about in this whole hour here.
Okay, so
real quickly, what about the Right to Life groups? You know, a lot of groups, that are basically saying, hey, what do you mean about population restrictions?
they need to be informed.
Thanks for asking. We have many members at World Population Balance. We have many members who are strongly pro-life, and we have others who are pro-choice, and they've all respectfully agreed to disagree about those other issues, so they can focus on solving overpopulation. So, yeah, I invite pro-life people to support us, and pro-choice as well. So
Okay.
that's a good question.
I'm going to ask them to put up the replay times, and we're going to change programs here. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dave. It was really good.
Right.
Great thing.
That was
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
there. Oh, good. Got a background. Oh, thank you for.
That all right, buddy? welcome to this section of the. Wow, it's really been good, folks. Trust me, I've been out on this election field, and it's been crazy. Anyway, again, welcome to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest, and then IPO. We're doing this piece today, but what we're going to do this time around, we're just going to sort of give you an update on some of the issues that the election, if you will, has been faced with, and it seems as though we've got an issue that came about as a result of one of the candidates running for city council, a gentleman by the name of Fred Stewart. And so we're going to use that particular piece, that particular person and whatever, and sort of reflect on that. And I've got a group of folks here that are going to we're going to talk about this piece. Because, running for office is not an easy thing. It's expensive. And secondly, I've always been a little bit concerned about the criteria in terms of how one goes about running for office. Because at the end of the day, it's all about issues and solutions. That's really what it's all about. But there are some major things like money. Money is always a major problem. A lot of times, if in fact you file to run for office, it doesn't say that you have to have X number of dollars. It just say file, put your name down, your phone number, and you're gone, and there you are. On the other hand, after you've done that, then the idea is that if you don't have the $20,000 or $30,000, you don't get the interviews, if you will, to share your issues. If anything, you're left out of the cause, and in many ways, the person who doesn't have the money may have better issues and whatever, and solutions, if you will, to the problems that we're having. So that's one major issue. And then the other is that when one goes to interviews or things of this nature, going through one's background that's another issue. How far do you go? To what extent do you go? There's a lot of things, but anyway, I've got some experts here with me today, and what I'm going to do to get this thing started is that first off, we're just going to go around the room. Just introduce yourself just briefly.
I'm Don Dupay. I was a retired Portland police officer and the author of this wonderful book called Behind the Badge in River City. Take this story for you.
And you've seen Don many times. You're going to see him more often anyway. T, then you got T.
My name's Teresa Griffin Kennedy. I'm Don's wife and also the editor of this book, and I've published 2 books myself, right. And we're both working on more books, and
we're politically active.
We're politically active,
I know that very much.
And we're writers, and we've both recently published opinion pieces in some news sources.
And I'm going to come back to you so we can throw that on the table. Nanda?
Yes, I am a campaign manager for Lenita Duke, running for City Council, position 1.
Good. And got Landon on here because, again, he's got a candidate that he's representing, which is great. And how does he deal with that piece aspect of it, too? Okay, so why don't we just get right into the meat of the matter, if you will. There was an article that appeared. The first one was in the Willamette Week.
April 13th.
April 13th, right? Again, it was in regards to Fred Stewart and his relationship with his daughter.
Right.
And it dates back, that particular incident dates back to
September of 2013.
2013. Very interesting time frame. Okay. All right, we got that piece. And what was the nature of that particular article? What
the nature of that article by Willamette Week was tabloid journalism. It was a piece that they exaggerated in an effort to destroy his political candidacy. Unfortunately for them, it's had the opposite effect, because I published my own response to it April 22nd, which was very popular and has been warmly received. And as a result of that, Steve Dean wrote his own poorly sourced, poorly written.
That's the Oregonian.
Right. He wrote that May 7th, and it was published May 7th. And then 2 days later, May 9th, Don responded to it with his own opinion piece, which also took off. And the result has been that now people know who Fred is, and he's getting more supporters, and he's getting people calling in and saying, I wasn't going to vote for you before, but now I am. And he's been getting donations, and it's had the opposite impact, I think, that Willamette Week and the Oregonian had anticipated.
Was there any rationale as to why the Willamette Week published the article to begin with?
I think they did it simply because they're struggling. They're a struggling print newspaper. Their readership is waning. They've had to downsize. They've had financial problems, much like the Oregonian, and they thought that it would be controversial and that it would increase readership. The reality is that when their article came out, on the Willamette Week website, there were people that were furious. A large number of white Portlanders were very critical of Willamette Week and Nigel Jaquiss. They published, they commented, they left very critical comments on the website, and those comments were deleted from Willamette Week, and the same thing happened at the Oregonian website. There were more than 35 comments that were critical of the Oregonian and Steve Dean after his opinion piece came out May 7th, and those comments by Portlanders were deleted, over 35 of them. So basically, Willamette Week and the Oregonian decided to destroy Fred Stewart's chances politically, and it's completely backfired.
Okay, but let's just say that, that whole rationale was to basically give the kind of background on the individuals, as soon as we're saying that in some way, shape, or form, the public needs to know.
Sure.
Because this individual, if elected, would not be the kind of representation, let's say, that the populace would tend to.
I think their ambition was to show that Fred Stewart is not suited for politics, and I don't agree with that at all. He's very positive, he's very proactive, he's one of the smartest people I've ever talked to. His knowledge of business and money and housing issues is just really impressive. I think he would be a ideal political candidate for Portland.
You know, I might add, and then Lynn, come on in there too, when you start thinking about all of us, for that matter, who are running for office have stories to tell.
Yeah.
And all of us have similar kinds of, well, when I say similar background, bankruptcies and things of that nature. And if in fact, I'm just throwing something on the table, if in fact those issues were pertinent, if you will, maybe that should have been listed in the filing process. You know, if there was any background within a certain period of time, because that's what normally happens. Even if you go through a bankruptcy aspect of it, after a certain period of time, it sort of is sponged off your record, right?
Yeah.
And that people recognize that. What do you think about that, man?
I had a feeling that the story on Fred Stewart was going to backfire against those newspapers. It showed Fred to be a real human being.
Right.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem that we have in politics is we have people who are plastic. They're not real. They're not trustworthy. And Fred seemed real and trustworthy there. So I think it was a great article. I'm glad it backfired on them. People are generally sympathetic towards someone who has a problem with their teenager. Because if anybody has a teenager, they have had problems.
Sure.
How do you think they're going to react to that at this point?
I think it's caught Nigel Jaquiss and Steve Dean by surprise. But
now,
my
these are
issue,
two writers. These are the two writers.
You know, they can say, oh, Nigel Jaquiss can say, oh, Mark Zussman made me do it all he wants, but the reality is he's the writer. He's the editor.
Okay.
The reality is, the reason I objected so strongly is because of the immorality of seducing a 19-year-old girl into that kind of situation. It's true that she contacted Willamette Week about a year ago. She's definitely been involved in the story from the very beginning. She wanted to get back at her dad. She's got issues with her mother. Her mother has a very questionable past. But for them to seduce this young girl who really doesn't know any better. She's only 19. I mean, seriously, what does she know? She's a bright girl. She has a wonderful future, but she's only 19. For Willamette Week and the Oregonian to do this, to get in between a relationship with a father and a daughter, to try to sabotage the relationship between a father and a daughter, to me is morally reprehensible.
Well, tell me this now. At one point in time, he ran against
Nick Fish. Right.
He ran against Nick Fish. Was that brought up during that particular time?
Steve Dean tried to insinuate that that was the reason that he was upset that Hunter had gotten contact information from Nick Fish. The reality is that Fred and I have talked numerous times, and he told me that he's been friendly with Nick Fish since, I think, 2008 when he ran against him. I mean, he's a professional. He's not going to be resentful. He's not going to be vindictive. He's been friendly with Nick Fish. He's been friendly with other people that he ran against and didn't, and lost to. So that insinuation that he was somehow angry at Nick Fish is just absolutely false. He's been friendly with Nick Fish for a long time.
Go on, Don.
Let me give you my perspective on Steve Dean. He's had his hours cut. He's down to one column a week. Because the Oregonian keeps getting smaller and smaller. Jeff Mapes went to OPB. I don't know where Steve Dean is going. But look at it this way. The upper management of the Oregonian said it would be a good idea to send Steve Dean, airfare and all, clear back to Manhattan, New York City, just to interview this girl, just to dig up more dirt on poor Bruce Stewart, Fred Stewart. They went, they went to all that trouble. That's the kind of story they thought it was.
Right.
It's bullshit journalism.
And the other thing
And
is,
shame on the Oregonian management for doing it.
yeah.
That's what made me mad. That's why I had to respond.
Yeah. The other thing that was included in Steve Dean's opinion piece is a statement that Hunter Stewart made on her Facebook page. I've analyzed this statement in detail, and there are several inconsistencies, and she has an issue, like a lot of 19-year-olds, with being truthful. And I discovered several inconsistencies and several things that she glossed over and wasn't completely truthful about. So, but I just still think that it's a terrible thing.
And that's a 19-year-old.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. And I don't think she even understands how fortunate she's been. I mean, she lived a comfortable life. She has had cars and computers and cell phones. She had braces. She had a lot of things a lot of Portlanders don't get. You know, she was 15 and 16 years old and driving her father's Jaguar. You know, I mean, I just think it's really tragic that Willamette Week and the Oregonian think so little of her future relationship with her father, that they would get involved in such a tawdry story, you know, trying to smear his name, you know, I mean, the title of Nigel Jaquis's piece, Fred Stewart pins his, I mean, the title is outrageous. It's pure yellow journalism. So yeah. The whole situation has backfired, and I don't think they expected it.
Well, let's think about that too a little bit, because I've run on several different occasions, and it's, when you're interviewing, if you will, with these folks, they got the whole idea of trivia. I never liked the idea of trivia, because I was thinking more serious thing, but it's about the issues, the issues and the solutions to these issues. It's not about trivia, and naturally since then, I've just opted not to go. I just don't get involved in any of those so-called interviews aspect of it. One, how do they get the message though? I mean, that's why we're doing the show. It's kind of like saying this has been a standard for years. This has not been just so happened to be in Fred, but this has been happening on and on and on. I mean, every time you pick up the paper about anybody running for office, even today's paper, I noticed that there was a big push on one of the mayoral candidates, Sarah, and it was in the Willamette Week today. But then there was this picture, this photo of her being booked.
Sure.
I thought that was interesting. You know what I mean? But does that have anything? You know what I'm saying?
Well, in terms of motivation for these stories, I think that the motivation is ultimately racism.
Yeah.
We have a white establishment in Portland, and I don't think that a lot of these white leaders want people of color in city council. I'm just going to come out and say it.
That's what I said in my piece. I'm appalled at the racism that this election cycle has brought forth.
Yeah.
I've lived here for a long time, and I didn't believe this town was as racist as it is. And I know you don't want to talk about it, but I stood up for you too.
I mean,
I stood up for you too, because the media largely ignored you. You weren't invited to the debates. It was like you weren't there. When I saw the ad on for one of the TV channels that said we're having a debate, there's a picture of two white guys. They're politically the same. One has brown eyes, one has blue eyes. And where are you? And where are the girls? And where are the other people? I was appalled at the racism this brought up. I'm ashamed of my city.
Well, I'm going to try to give them some sense of identity, you know, and understand, because you're right, because when I think about, all due respect, our local OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting aspect of it, you're right, two Oregonians went to, two people from the Oregonian went to OPB, and Jeff Mapes and Anna Griffith. And I knew both of them.
Another one from the Oregonian.
Another from the Oregonian, and I knew both of them. And I remember when I filed to run for office, I called up Jeff Mapes, got him on the phone and said, hey, I just filed to run for mayor of the city of Portland. And he said, Bruce, I'll get right back to you. and I have not heard from him since.
Of course
Yeah.
not.
And then naturally you think about what's very interesting about the whole piece. They just recently did a poll, OPB, and I was number 3, but yet they were still looking at
Sure.
the 4 top.
I'm sorry, Bruce,
Folks,
but you're invisible to the
Well,
media.
I'd like to hear what Landon thinks.
Landon,
Yeah.
give me a feeling.
You know what I think?
What, in fact, what about Lanita? How was she received in the media?
Lanita is actually received very well. She's trending up in the polls. There's a lot of buzz on social media about her.
No, but what about the media from the standpoint of calling her as far as
None,
debates and
none,
anything of that
none,
nature?
None at all.
None at all.
None at all. They are interested in what they're interested in, and that's it.
Right.
They do not want to hear about anything else, which really deprives the city of Portland the best that Portland has to offer.
It does.
Yeah.
It when we have inclusive practices, whether it's housing, whether it's the police department, whether it's education, whether it's employment, when we have inclusive practices practiced throughout the city is a better place for everybody.
Yeah.
But when we separate people, it creates a greater problem than any of us can handle. The election process, to me, is very disheartening in America.
Yeah.
That they would single you out, not even have you in an article, and you're number 3. But we will put Sarah Iannarone up
Right.
because why? We want to see somebody that looks like us.
Right.
And they are cheating the city of what is best for the city of Portland. They would rather have the establishment be the same way it's always been rather than change and make things better. It's disheartening.
They look at you like they're the right side and you're nobody. When I ran for sheriff in 2006 from Multnomah County Sheriff, I was interviewed by the Oregonian, and the first question they asked me was, "Oh, how much money do you have? How do you think you can do?" They didn't care about my platform. They didn't ask me about Wapato. They didn't ask me about the homeless, what I would do about the police department if I was a sheriff. How much money did you spend? And then they put a little picture, thumbnail picture of me on the page, front page. It says, pot-smoking grandpa who would be sheriff.
Gee.
I mean, they wrote me off. I had some really good ideas,
did.
and I ran against
You sure
Bernie
did.
Justu,
I remember that.
who was a creep,
Who's a crook?
who was a crook.
Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
Absolute power corrupts.
Well, you know,
absolute
the thing, I guess the other thing that
what makes me mad.
I want to throw on the table is that in many ways, we've read it many times over, that the city of Portland has been identified as the whitest city in the country.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
United States. And
never
people
knew
people
that.
got upset about it. You know, people got upset about it,
Right.
and you would think, well, okay, if you're upset about something, then what are we going to do about it? And that's one of the reasons why I'm having this piece here right now, because doing something about it is not digging the hole deeper and deeper, if you will. Because you're right. I mean, we've got folks here that are very articulate, especially some of the folks that are running for office today. I mean, we've got, I think there's another mayoral candidate. She happens to be an African American. Was it Deborah? Very articulate woman and good ideas and whatever. And she's also cited to me about how she had been treated, if you will, and as far as debates are concerned and whatever. And the same thing with another. I think a woman's running for. I think she's running for the
Seat 4.
C4.
Yeah, and I know who you mean.
Yeah. I think she's running for county. One's running for county, and one's running for the House of Representatives aspect of it. And they were telling me also some of the things that they were coming up with and the problems that we're having, and they were thanking me naturally for giving them the opportunity to come over here and do it. You know.
As I said in my editorial, Portland is happy to have a wonderful, thriving black community, but don't run for office.
Because they're
Then you're stepping over the line.
Right.
We want you in the community. We're happy to have you here spending money, but don't cross that line. Don't you dare run for office.
It's
And
just
that
difficult.
just gives our town a terrible.
Now we do have issues
Yeah.
within our own community.
Well, we do have issues with our own
we
community.
share-
We need to work on our
Yeah, we-
unity.
yeah,
We
yeah.
need to work on our unity, but that's beside the point.
Yeah.
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 The point is that we have to be more inclusive in this city.
Absolutely.
We have to be more inclusive. It can't be, I love your barbecue, I
Right,
just don't like you
right,
in my
right.
neighborhood.
Right,
Exactly.
right,
I like your
exactly.
Chinese food, but I don't like Chinese people.
Yeah.
Right.
I like Mexican, but guess what? No more tortillas.
Yeah.
That's Portland.
That's where it's at.
Right.
It's not inclusive.
true, it's
we
true.
have boroughs.
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
Bruce, yeah.
And the thing that frustrates me is that a lot of these guys, Nigel Jaquist, Steve Dean, they really think that they're liberal. They really think that they don't harbor racist beliefs.
That's the beauty of liberalism.
Right. But the reality is their behavior proves otherwise. You know, they don't write about issues that are important to people of color. They don't care. They have their little special interest articles, and then they do things like what they did to Fred Stewart, you know?
Well, like many of us,
Yeah.
myself included, aspect of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, my point is that the way I was running mine was from experience.
You know,
I sort of knew where I was.
Yeah.
I was listening
I didn't
to
know my place, but I knew where I was.
I was listening to a debate, a video of Sean Davis.
Yeah.
And he was interviewed, I don't know who it was who was interviewing him, but they asked him this one question, and I thought to myself, wow. They asked him whether he owned his own home or whether he rented his home. And I thought, that is the most classist thing to ask. Does it matter? Is it relevant to his desire to run for office, whether he rents or owns? But that's that classist attitude that so many people in Portland have. You know, I was
They
really
asked me
surprised.
how I got to the interview. Did I take public transportation or did I drive my car?
This was in
I drove
2000.
my car. What kind of a
2006.
car do you have? I happen to have a Cadillac.
Yeah,
Bernie drove his county car. But I mean, what the hell does it have to do with the way I got there?
yeah, yeah.
Well, one of the
To
things.
make me look more plebeian or something?
Right.
One of the things that I've recognized through the years, through my times of running for office, I can say that today, most of the folks who are covering, if you will, the elections and things like that, they have no background. And if they don't have any background, that means they're not familiar with what the issues are.
Right.
And a lot of times they're basically asking you the issues and also the solutions. And if you don't know where you've been, how are you going to even be able to respond to the response that the candidate might have had? The candidate might be giving you the right answer, but you don't know how to interpret, because there has to be a translation in terms of after you've spoken to a person. That's the thing that I've seen. I've seen it in articles. I've seen it just trying to articulate where you are, and then like I said, the trivia thing and this, that, and the other, just blows your mind. I mean,
Some of these people are too young and they haven't been in Oregon or
That's right.
Portland very
That's right.
long.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
I've been here for a long time. I have a good perspective of it. These kids that are up now, 25, 30 years old, they haven't been here long enough. They don't know what's been going on in Oregon. They don't know what a rich tradition of racism we have from Vanport on up.
Oh yeah,
know.
Very, very much so. Any thoughts?
I wrote the history book on it.
Part of it.
Any additional thoughts, sir?
On no.
You should comment. We're here. I mean, that's what it's all
Well,
about.
you know, I think that again we have to be more inclusive all the way around, and definitely that's Ms. Duke's position, that we need an inclusive city that works for everybody. Racism will always exist in America. It will always exist in the city. But in order to bring about change, we have to be inclusive of different communities of all colors, not just
I agree.
a few people. The tragedy of what we have on city council now is that 3 of the 5 people on city council all live in Southwest Portland. One lives in Eastmoreland, and Fish lives somewhere between the river and 33rd. We have 4 people who drive past the Misery every morning, or actually they don't drive past the Misery, because you don't see homeless people on Barber Boulevard or Capitol Highway. You don't see homeless people south of Holgate.
Right.
You see them all on the east side of the river, between Holgate and the Columbia River. It's a tragedy. That's why we need change in City Hall. That's why we need you, Bruce.
Well, it's the issue. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
I have been here a couple of days, just like Don. I mean, that's why we sort of candidly talk about the whole issue of police and whatever, because that's his background.
Right.
And I respect that. You know what I'm saying? and vice versa on my end of the deal. I'm a small business person. I've been around. I've been involved in a lot of stuff, and that's one of the reasons why I'm bringing it to the table. But I'm also saying, okay, fine, ask me the question. Ask me the question and give me the answer. But in all due respect, if you're speaking to someone that doesn't have no idea of being able to do that, I can pretty well tell they're so nervous just being able to ask the question, right, Don?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Now, I have to put this other part on the table because I think it's just as important. Like you say, it have to be inclusive. But I'm also thinking about our media. I'm talking about the minority media. I'm very familiar with the media. I used to own the Portland Observer newspaper, and then we got the Scanner. I also know we got El Hispanic, and we've got the Asian Reporter. And what I've found in that particular arena, the Asian Reporter doesn't want to cover politics. They won't even talk about endorsements.
Right.
But yet they're sitting there with the IE for the affirmative action piece when the money comes down the pot after the election. Okay? And then consequently, the people who are basically running, who are elected to office will say, okay, fine, I'll get one from that group, or I'll get one from this group, and et cetera. And then, so in all due respect, the lead person or the lead group, from a media standpoint, it's political, has been the black media. And then the black media has its issues. Because I've noticed that also too, from the standpoint of saying, if anything, we just went through a number of interviews where we had the Assembly of Black Affairs here, and it's supposed to be Assembly of Black Affairs, but yet the person didn't even identify the blacks that had been running around the state of Oregon. Again, that's an issue, but we did resolve it here. But then at the end of the day, when they had the debates and whatever at the so-called convention, because the person was a Republican, all of a sudden they threw that one out.
Sure.
And just maintained this other. It's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about the issues.
Yes, it is.
It's about issues. If you happen to be one, fine. You know, but the bottom line, that was wrong. That was wrong. And secondly, as far as the scan of the Observer newspaper, they should have had every elected, or not elected, everybody wanting to run for office on the front page and educate the public. Because the majority of the public wants to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Are there folks there are progressive enough to understand what's going down? And if not, then let's see what we can do to bring them to the table, as you were saying about inclusiveness. But if we got a medium that's doing just the opposite, and then they too are waiting, if you will, because in most cases the majority community will contact them and say, well, what can we do? Blah blah blah. Well, to tell you what, just come on Martin Luther King Day and drop a couple of bucks and everything is fine. We'll give you a certificate. You've done it for the year. See, I'm saying that because I'm seeing it happen. And then at the end of the day, we're complaining over here, trying to figure out, well, who's communicating our issues? You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of like a double-sided sword, if you will, or whatever. But one's bigger than the other. Let's put it that way. You know what I'm saying? So we wanted to do this piece because it's very important. I mean, we become a very small planet. And even within our communities, we're living together. Now we got situations right now in the Northeast Portland corridor where supposedly all the blacks will live. They're being gentrified, and nobody understands why. What's the problem?
Right.
What's the problem? It's supposed to be just America. You can move anywhere you want to, which is true. But we're still keeping this whole business of the black community. There's no such thing as a black community. It's a community where maybe a few of the folks live there. They're all over the place. Gresham, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
And when I'm running around there looking at homeless, the majority, in all due respect, are white. Should I segregate myself from them? No, I'm dealing with the issues. And that's who I'm talking with down there. We're trying to figure out what the issues of homelessness is all about. So, so I would agree. We've got to do something. And media is a very, very important medium. They got to communicate, but we also have to support it. Most people don't even pick up the newspaper today. Most people don't even turn the news on anymore today.
They go to the computer.
They go to computer or Facebook. Well, Facebook is really probably about the best medium now because people can pick it up. Young folks want to pick it up. That's why it's so important. That's why it's so important on the inclusiveness standpoint that they are included. Because if we get to this next generation, it's going to be some real problems. We got some very serious problems.
I think what really needs to happen in City Hall is that the white establishment leaders need to do more than just talk.
Yeah.
They need to walk the walk. They need to support leaders of color. They need to help leaders of color be elected. They need to stop talking about diversity and inclusivity, and they need to walk the walk. Because it seems to me like all they're doing is just saying what's politically correct. We support diversity, we support inclusivity, but when it comes right down to it, their behavior defies what they're saying. You know?
You should have seen them at the Oregon Association of Black Affairs.
Right.
They all said the same thing.
Yep, that's right.
We support this. We support this. But how many blacks have you actually promoted in your own bureau?
Right. Right.
How many Hispanics have you promoted in your own bureau?
Yeah.
None.
But were those questions being asked at the Assembly of Black Affairs?
They were not asked.
Okay, but then at the same time, they were all endorsed by the Oregon Assembly of Black
Exactly.
Affairs. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that is the problem.
See?
That is the problem. Therein lies the problem. You can't have a better community unless everybody has a chance to achieve a better way of life. Otherwise, you will have issues where the police are shooting up young black men on the streets because they're not employable. You're going to have these problems. If you have people who are employable, then you don't have this crime problem. The states of Massachusetts, Vermont, Connecticut have the lowest crime rates in the United States. Why? Because they spend $18,000 a year in education. We spend $8,400 a year in education. We spend $30,000 per inmate for incarceration. Something's got to change.
I agree with you.
You
But
can't
we
get
got
a Bible in the schoolroom, but you can get one in the cellar.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Exactly.
So it is a problem. It's a serious problem. We're going through the election now. We haven't gotten into the general yet. We're just getting over the primary aspect of it. Now the idea is that who's going to be sitting at the table for those interviews? Well, naturally, we're definitely going to be there. I'm going to be there for sure. We're going to be there, right, Don?
Yeah, sure.
And we're going to be asking about these various
I'm always
issues.
there.
But, so it's not too late. My point is that it's not too late to do something. You know, at the end of the day, you know, hopefully we can educate these folks who are out there, and then they will respond by whether it be talking about a diverse staff or anything of that nature. You got my point? And in fact, another point that came up to mind with reference to the media, from our media's aspect of it, and it's typical. You know what I mean? I think about it. There's two black newspapers, Observer and the Scanner. I used to own one, the Observer, and I used to always identify. But the fact that you got two black newspapers, and not a one have called me.
That's just
And not even said, just even on the
amazing.
phone, or if not, just
Well,
call
let
me
me
a
ask you this.
name.
Have you heard from the NAACP?
Well, I used to be the vice president. And
Have you heard from them?
No,
Have you heard from the Urban League?
no.
That's our problem.
Okay. How do we solve that? What do you think we should do?
I think we.
How do you do it? Just straight up.
I
How do we do
think
it?
I would go over. I just talked to somebody from the Urban League today.
Yes.
I would go over and bum rush that organization because they are not doing what they should be doing. Do you know during the housing crisis or prior to the housing crisis, 69% of the people, African Americans in the city of Portland, were homeowners. It is down less than 28%.
Wow.
It wiped out the community. Gentrification wasn't the problem. It wiped out the community. That's why we have a gang problem. We're going to have a bloodbath this summer. We need
Yep.
police on the streets. But we created this problem because we allowed this passive behavior in the establishment to run things. We need change.
I agree with you. In fact, I like to ditto that piece on the housing piece. I can remember knocking on doors when I first filed to run for office, trying to figure out, well, where are the vets? Where were they living? I'm going to run around looking for the vets, you know, so that I can maybe, Dawn and I can walk up to them and say, okay, let's take you down to the VA and get some benefits and whatever. And you're looking around, so you go down to City Hall and knock on the door and say, okay, fine, you're the housing, you got the housing bureau. Here's a card. No, nothing. No, basically, this is where they are, this is where they're housed. All you hear from a public standpoint in the press is, well, gee whiz, they're all housed now, and we have no problem. The vets are all housed. Where are they?
Yeah.
My point is that bureau should know exactly how many houses we need, how many folks are homeless. You see what I'm saying? This way, that's to me, that's the job. And the same thing, in all due respect, with the league and the people in the community. Okay, how many? As you said, how many homes are owned by African Americans? How many? Why did they lose them? I mean, just basic stuff.
But they never said anything once it happened.
So what are they
The
doing?
churches died. Everybody died. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. That's why we're in the situation we're in now. That's why we need change in City Hall.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it continues to escalate. So you have this growing population of Hispanics.
Yeah.
You have one Hispanic for every 4 kids in public school nowadays, in elementary school. So that means there's 25%. Census showed 12%. There's really more Hispanics. So when you have a growing population, people, so what's going to happen if you can't employ them, if you can't teach them? We have a trashed educational system. We have more crime and we have less police.
No voc ed.
And the other thing about education is that the majority of teachers are white.
Yeah, yeah.
And
they
if
don't know.
they're not
They
going
don't
to
know.
treat
Yeah.
Hispanic students or
Yeah.
students of color equally with the same effort, then those students are going to suffer, you know.
They will suffer. They will suffer.
Portland leadership has no concept of full. We are full. We don't need more people coming in. We can't fix the roads now. We can't fund the schools now. We can't hire enough cops now. How many more high-rises can we tolerate? How much longer is the water going to last? How much longer is the electricity going to last? We're full. You can't put 12 gallons in a 10-gallon bucket, and we're at 10 gallons. We don't need it, and we got Steve Novick, more density, more density.
Right.
Full of shit.
What Don's saying is that we need to take care
We're
of we need
full.
to take care of the people that are here.
When we can fix the roads and take care of the kids, okay, then maybe we can take a few more people, but we can't take them now.
Yeah, they keep
We're
coming, though.
saturating ourselves
I
stupidly.
know they keep coming though.
Well, that's the,
I-
in all due respect, that's the whole idea behind an election. You know, you hear these comments, and then hopefully you put them down in such a fashion. Say, well, we got a problem here. We got issues. We're looking for solutions, i.e., the people who are going to be running for office. Is there anybody out there that can have a solution to this problem? And then to me, that's the election process.
Yeah.
But we're not doing it. It's always after the fact.
Yeah.
It's always after the fact. They get the folks that they want, and they sit there, and they're like, now we've got one mayor, and that's it.
Do we have a mayor?
We just got one.
Really?
We have no commissioners. They're just sitting there with pet. And I'm not trying to knock on them personally, but that's the structure that we have today. I mean, when you can, and we're supposed to be taxpayers. You know, supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But these individuals are treating you like just the opposite.
Yeah.
It's insulting.
Yeah. I am glad though that the scanner. I just have to mention the scanner did endorse Fred Stewart, so I'm happy about that. But I know that there are other issues with the scanner that need addressing
Well,
that I don't really understand.
I understand what happened. we'll leave that one there as is. But he had to do something. Because we did have the Oregon Voters Digest out there making, just like we're talking right now.
Yeah.
I'd much rather that Bernie, whomever the others, just give us a call and let's sit down and chat. Okay, it's not late.
No.
But on the other end, you can't do this business anymore of saying, well, okay, fine, well, I'm just gonna go in and endorse this guy who we know is win, and then he picks up a couple of bucks, and then the rest of the community suffers. We got problems here. We got young men and women right here now in this area, in this city. We have no voc ed. All your outlining schools have it, and the purpose for voc ed is to give you the enthusiasm to pick up your books and read, because you have to read.
Yeah.
And voc ed was a necessity. We don't have that in this particular community. That's an insult. We got seniors, if you will, that are eating cat food and stuff like that, and it's going to get worse than that.
It will.
Because it's called baby boomers, and a lot of folks are. Let's throw that out. We went down to OPB the other day. Well, you know, went down there to OPB and said, hey, look, what's about the possibility of doing a piece on putting together a show for veterans and seniors.
Right.
I never heard back from her.
No, you won't. Well, I'm saying that's just another issue we have to follow up on because we're still in the election process.
But I do want to say I'm thrilled that the articles by Willamette Week and the Oregonian backfired.
Okay.
Because what it means is more support for Fred Stewart. I just have to say that.
Well, more support for community across the board.
Yes.
The
Yes.
Portland community. We got
Yes.
The Portland community's got to recognize no one's leaving. I mean, we're gonna all be here. So we need to get to the table and try to figure out. Let's make darn sure we got communication on the table, and we got the issues on the table and solutions, and it involves all of us because it's going to affect us all.
Right.
All across the board, because if a person is not working, guess who has to pick up the tab? The person who is working.
Right.
And
Right.
people need to understand that. That's serious business. It's no sense in getting angry because you will pay. Because if you want more than that, then okay, fine. Let's send them in the criminal justice, and you pay more there.
Right.
See what I mean? Because I tell you, I can still remember when I was in the Marine Corps and I was recruiting, and all of a sudden I had my social part of it. Well, I'm going to go down to the criminal justice system. I go down to the institution and just talk to the folks and whatever. and going in the snow and this, that, and the other. I'm tired and going down there, and I get down to the institution, and boy, everybody's so nice and happy, all starched up and nice and just well fed and this, that, and the other. And I'm sitting there looking and saying, gee, you got to be kidding me. Nobody can, they have to worry about paying any bills or nothing like that. They just got a nice environment aspect there. And I got to drive home in the snow. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there from the standpoint of saying our priorities are wrong. And we do have an over incarceration of young men. What do they do when they get out?
Right.
They get on the rolls.
Right.
Then you got some elements say, well, they need jobs. Okay, well, what about this person who didn't commit the crime? They need jobs too. So what are we going to do? They're not even trained before they get out. I mean, I've gone through different kinds of issues, if you will, where people put together programs, if you will, for the ex-offender. Why can't you solve that problem before you let them go?
Yeah.
Education in prisons is so important. That was one of my concentrations when I was an undergraduate, was studying about education in prisons.
Yeah,
And
but
it's
you know what
so
happens
important.
in education now? A lot of times it is education. They don't have the high school diploma, right?
Yeah.
But guess what? If they're in the institution, they don't have to go to school. It's their right. What do you mean? I've got you in a controlled environment. You will go to school because that's one of the problems that got you there to begin with.
Yeah.
So then they're educated, right? So anyway,
We have to work on the education problem before
it's huge.
they get there.
It's huge.
PPS is probably one of the worst districts in the United States, next to Reynolds and Parkrose,
Yeah.
for children of color
Yes, I
as
agree.
a whole.
I
At this
agree.
present time, PPS is under federal watch by the Department of Education.
Really, I didn't know
Yes.
that.
Well,
Wow.
it's a little secret. No one knows.
It's a moneymaker.
Nice.
Everybody knows now.
Okay.
But Landon, it's a
It-
moneymaker.
It is a moneymaker.
It's a moneymaker.
It is a moneymaker.
If you look at the kinds of dollars that are being pumped here
yeah.
in Portland Public Schools, it would blow your mind. You'd be better off just giving the parents the money, just let them just do their own.
And then
They'd
the
have a job.
The kids aren't getting music, they're not getting sports, and they're not getting vocab.
They're not learning. They're supposed to be granted, if you will, an education during the public school. Those formative years, supposed to get the best education they can get, but they're not getting anything.
Well, I'll tell you what's even worse about PPS. So, for about 3 years, between the years of 2011 and or 2010 and 2013, they restricted all students from leaving PPS. So, if you wanted to leave the district and go to another school, like to Centennial or David Douglas, they would not allow you to leave the PPS system. And so you had to either stay in PPS, or if you went to Centennial or David Douglas, you had to pay out of pocket.
Okay.
It's about $5,000, which is a violation of your First Amendment, of your rights for No Child Left Behind. But these are the kind of criminal activities that go on in Portland Public Schools when they say, yeah, we're trying to do better, when they're really not. Because there are, I think there's several thousand parents that every year want to leave PPS and go to a different district, whether it's Lake Oswego or
Sure.
West Lynn or
Sure.
whatever, because they have better
Right.
programs. But they can't go there because PPS won't release them.
Right.
And that involves releasing tax funds.
Sure.
That's terrible.
They've got an administrator that makes over $100,000 a year and don't teach one kid. I know that's not their job, but to me that just galls me.
Yeah.
If you're making that kind of money, you better teach somebody.
Yeah, it's appalling. It's appalling, the process. The fact that King's School, for the last 10 years, except for when Miss Duke was teaching them, they never make over 20% of the kids, only 20% of the kids or less meet benchmark. This is in the last 10 years, except for the 2 years I think Miss Duke was teaching over there. And then once the new principal came, they got rid of her.
I read about that story, and I was really, really upset by that.
Well, hey, look, where's the camera? Here you are. I mean, you're hearing it right here. We got issues. So what do? We're going to have to do something about it. Don't get angry. Yeah, talk to your neighbor. Call your official. Call the people who are wanting to be elected that you're getting ready to vote on. Okay? Read what you get. Make sure you get a response in regards to what your needs are. They're just not just pretty faces of this, that, and the other. Seriously, you need to really get down in this issue right here. It's big.
It is big.
It is big. Think about your kids. Think about your moms. Think about, you know, the whole 9 yards. You gotta get involved. We're getting to be a small society. And trust me, the only other option that you have with your kids nowadays is the criminal justice system. That's really a sad note. And the way prices are going up with food, you can't even afford that. You know what I'm saying? So in all due respect, you know, we're getting ready to get into the general election. They're going to select the people that are going to be the ones you're going to be voting on. You got 2 people. Some are going to already be elected. I'm suggesting you make sure you read your voters pamphlet. Make sure you call those people in before you vote. Make sure you ask them the right question. And when you read your papers or your editorial, write a little note. You can, in fact, you can just scribble anything down and send it in. We have to do that. It's very important. I mean, people are angry.
I think we also need to open up discussion about race
Oh,
with
yes.
white city council members. Honestly, challenge them about their conceptual, their concepts of race and how and what they think, because there's so many just microaggressions that go on.
Well, I'm agreeing with the. At the same time, I'm also including the minorities, whether it be Asian, Hispanic.
Yeah.
Ask them the question.
Yeah.
What's my problem? Someone says to me, in fact, Bruce Broussard said that you don't like me. Ask him the question just that way. You see what I'm saying? Ask him the question. Don't sit down there going to breakfasts and this, that, and the other and paying the dude and say, I've done this for blacks this year, or Hispanics or Asian, whatever. Tell them to come up with a speaker that's going to educate you about the relationship that you have with one another.
Yeah.
Don't just play that kind of game. Don't sit up there on the diocese. Learn what's going on. Ask them the question. You're paying for it. Ask them the question. That's why I put names out. I don't sit around and play games with it. I want to buy. I'd like to pick up that scanner tomorrow, because I pick up all the papers. But I want to read something. I want to get educated. That's what it's there for. So why? Okay, everybody. I got about another 2 minutes. Real quick, like Landon. Real quick. Give me about 30 seconds of your thought. Real quick, like.
Vote Lenita Duke.
There you go.
Me? Okay. I hope that people vote for Fred Stewart.
There you go. You got to be.
Absolutely.
Okay. Vote for Bruce and
Vote
Don.
for Fred Stewart.
And
Vote,
Bruce and
vote
Don.
for Bruce.
Bruce and Don.
And we got to stop his concept of being not full enough. You know,
Okay.
we've got more than we need.
Okay. Read your voters pamphlet again and consider voting for me. I appreciate it. Okay. Good. Well, look, we got about 2 minutes left, and I think I've said a lot, if you will. I think I have. You know what I'm saying? And I'm asking anybody out there would like to come and sit down right here, and i.e. share your thoughts. Please, be our guest. Be my guest. I would say to the black newspapers, to the Hispanic newspapers, to the Asian newspapers, be my guest. I want you to come down here and respond to what your responsibilities are, and that is to communicate for your respective culture. Very important to the majority community.
Yes.
And to those Willamette Weeks and the Oregonians and those guys, whatever, give me a call. Come here. When I call you up and ask you to come down here and i.e. join me and i.e. talking to whatever issue there is, please. Hey, come on over, talk. Let's not quit playing. Let's play.
We'll even give them an escort if they don't feel
Can
safe.
we do that, Tom? You pick them up?
I'll pick them up.
No problem. No
I'll give
problem.
them an escort.
That's
Don't feel safe. We'll fix you up.
You'll fix it up, will you?
We'll protect you.
But you know, like I say, we've shared our thoughts and our feelings. These are real folks, by the way, folks. I want you to know I wouldn't have invited them otherwise because they know how I am. So and I know how they are. But these are real folks, you know. I mean, these are folks that they've gone beyond that other area aspect of it. We're just thinking about the other folks who are not there yet. That's causing them. They're having some real serious problems. And
Yeah.
anything I can do. You understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying? That's really what we're talking about.
Well, and the other reason I got involved in Fred Stewart's campaign was because I believed in him, and the reason that I wrote the editorial I wrote was because I was so angry about the suffering his mother went through and what he went through, because he was so hurt by that. So yeah, vote for Fred Stewart.
All right, good. Okay, we'll get the
Bruce.
credit. Thanks very much for joining us, and share this with your family, with your friends, folks, and everybody, and whatever, because it's a beautiful word. It's back, as George Spade used to always say on KBOO, back to what you believe in. Have a good one. God bless. Take care. We can keep talking. We got to talk.